Hello guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to take you through my top 3 ways to cook tofu. Now I've had a lot of requests to make tofu instructional type videos because I know when you're first coming into the world of eating tofu and cooking it at home, it can be kind of overwhelming. I remember going to the store, even first realizing they sold tofu at regular grocery stores, that it comes in this weird watery packaging, and I'm like, how am I supposed to cook this? How am I supposed to make this taste good? So I understand where you guys are coming from if you're one of those people. So today I'm going to take you through some tofu tips and then the 3 ways that I currently like to cook tofu. So tofu, if you've tried it before, when you try it by itself and it's plain, it is very plain, has almost no flavor. So that just means you have to add spices and things like that, which is actually kind of nice because it has no flavor. You can customize it to any dish, any flavor, and there's a bunch of different ways to cook it. There's a bunch of different textures. So I feel like it can be very versatile, and it is definitely my favorite source of protein by far. So with all that being said, I'm going to show you guys the 2 types of tofu I generally get, and that is these 2. Now I don't always get these exact brands, but I do usually get a high protein tofu. So this is the one I get at Whole Foods, but they have pretty much the same thing at Trader Joe's, which is the one I get more often, and it's like sealed more so like this, high protein, so it's extra firm. The other one I'll get is more so like this. In this type of box, I'll get firm or extra firm. And even though this one says extra firm, the high protein is always more firm than ones like this. But what I usually use these ones for is tofu scrambles, which I'm gonna get into. There's also a 3rd type of tofu I get here and there, probably mainly I'll get it in the summer more, and that is silken tofu. The reason I get that more in the summer is because it's nice to add a tiny bit of it to smoothies to up the protein. You can't taste it at all. It's pretty like runny. So that's another tip, is if you want to add a little bit more protein to your smoothies. Back in the day, before I was vegan, I would add raw eggs to a smoothie, like one, which seems so gross to me now. I feel like that's a replacement for it, putting a little bit of silken tofu in there. Next thing I wanted to talk about is that I like to freeze my tofu when I get it home from the grocery store. Typically this kind, I don't really freeze the other kind that I use for scrambles. And the reason I do this is because I found it will suck the water out of the tofu. Therefore, the tofu, when you go to cook it, more easily absorbs sauces and spices and things like that. So I've made a habit of that. I'll stick them in the freezer when I first get home, and then the day before I want to have tofu, which is pretty much every day, I'll take one out of the freezer and put it in the fridge to kind of unthaw. You can also use things like tofu presses, which you can get on Amazon, but I've never used one. I feel like this is more of an easy hack. I'm kind of lazy, so that's all the tips I have for you for basic tofu tips. Let's just jump straight in to these recipes. I have all my clips I've filmed on my laptop because I did these on separate days. Didn't want to make a bunch of tofu all at once and then just have it sitting around. I typically like to cook my tofu the day I'm going to eat it. I don't really like to pre-prep it because I feel like the flavors aren't as good, the texture is not as good. So that's kind of the one thing I don't really food prep besides putting it in the freezer. But let's go ahead and get into recipe number 1. Okay, so for recipe number 1, we are making a tofu scramble. I feel like this is the most basic tofu recipe, probably the one that's all over YouTube, but I really like this one when I am feeling lazy, like I don't want to cook something that takes too much time, if I'm in a rush. So for this one, I'm using the Trader Joe's organic firm tofu in that more watery packaging. So I'm just gonna cut that open, and I generally use half a block of tofu as a serving. That's not what the label says for serving sizes, that's just what I typically use at a meal. So I crumple that up all on the pan on about medium to high heat. In this recipe, I use paprika, onion powder, garlic powder, turmeric, black pepper, and then this vegan chickenless seasoning from Trader Joe's. So typically in a tofu scramble, I will use nutritional yeast, but I didn't have any this particular day. So the vegan chickenless seasoned salt actually makes it taste great. I love that. Put all those spices on, mix it all together. Once everything is mixed is when I'll occasionally add a splash of plant milk if I feel like it needs it, if it maybe needs a little bit more liquid, but that's not always the case. With tofu scrambles, you can add whatever veggies you like the best. For me, it's sometimes asparagus, but more so typically it's spinach and mushrooms. I love mushrooms. I've talked about this before because they are higher in protein for a vegetable. So I've diced some of those up, and then some spinach, and just popped that in there, mixed it around, waited for it to all soften and cook through, and then the tofu scramble was done. So I ate this tofu scramble with a half and everything bagel with a little bit of, I think, vegan butter on it. I love bagels, okay? So this is a really good breakfast meal. I'll also sometimes eat tofu scramble with rice mixed in if I want to have it for lunch, or I will put it in a tortilla and have like a breakfast burrito. And then I topped it off with the green dragon sauce from Trader Joe's. You should check that sauce out. So bomb. And that is how I make tofu scramble. Moving on to recipe number 2. So this recipe is one of my newer ones. I like this one because it is fairly quick. So I'll take the high protein tofu that I have previously put in the freezer, unthawed it, chop up half of that into slices, and then I pop those slices on the stove. Again, I cook it on medium to high heat. So with this recipe, you can use whatever sauces you like, but today in this video, I used coconut aminos, which gives it like a sweet flavor, kind of like teriyaki sauce. And then I also put onion powder on top. So I will just put both of those things, the sauces, the spices, on the tofu and let it cook. I also put salt on. Everything I do isn't very timed or measured. I just kind of eyeball things and guess. So after I feel like it's been cooking on that one side for long enough and I'm kind of watching it, I'll take my little tongs, I think that's what you call them, and I will flip all the tofu slabs onto the other side. And you can see here that they cooked pretty crispy. So good. This is probably my favorite way to make tofu. So once those have cooked through on both sides, if I need to add extra sauce, I will. I'll just add a splash of coconut aminos again once I've flipped them. Once they are done, you can eat them with anything you like. Typically, I pair it with a carb like sweet potato, rice, something like that, and a vegetable, which is what I did today. So I had it with broccoli, rice, and then I also have been really loving this BioLife feta, vegan feta, so good. And that's that. Real quick, real simple, and delicious. Look at that, we're finally at recipe number 3. So for recipe number 3, you can use either of the tofus I've mentioned. Today I used the Trader Joe's organic firm, the same one I used to make the tofu scramble. I think on this particular day I made both halves because I was cooking for Dallin as well. But for myself, I'll just have half the block, and I chop it up into cubes, not slabs, cubes. Then I'm going to take either cornstarch or arrowroot starch. Today I used arrowroot starch. I just kind of like that one better. And I sprinkle, I think it's 8 grams. I measure it out on my scale, so 8 grams per serving. So I think I probably did 16 for the whole batch. So I'm gonna put those tofu cubes into a bowl, sprinkle the 16 grams of arrowroot starch on top of all the cubes, and then I also put salt and pepper on top of that. For this, you're going to have wanted to preheat your oven to 400 degrees. I should have said that first. Then I'm going to mix all the tofu together, get everything well coated with the arrowroot starch all over each piece. And then I'm going to line a little baking sheet. I like to use my spray oil. It minimizes the amount of oil you're using, and it's just a lot more time efficient. And then I will spread out all that mixed tofu across the pan. So once your oven is preheated, go ahead and pop that tofu sheet into the oven, and we're going to cook for 25 minutes. This is what I found has made them most crispy. The arrowroot starch is what's going to make the tofu cubes have that crispiness to them, arrowroot starch or cornstarch. So you kind of, that's an important part of the recipe, okay? Once the 25 minutes is up, I will take them out of the oven and they're ready to go. So good. This is probably one of the first ways I learned to cook tofu after doing tofu scrambles, and I still love it. It does take a little bit longer than the other 2 recipes, but the crispiness is really good. So on this particular day, I ate this tofu with rice, broccoli, and then this super delicious Thai green curry simmer sauce that I also got at Trader Joe's. Who's surprised? Nobody. So this curry sauce was so good. Once again, with this tofu recipe, you could eat it with anything. I think I've eaten it with spaghetti before, or you can just kind of break it up and make it simple, rice and vegetables, something like that. And then another thing with this recipe is you can add whatever spices you want to as well. I usually just keep this one simple and then add sauces after if I feel like. But that's it for recipe number 3. And And there you have it. That is my 3 favorite ways to cook tofu. So again, tofu can kind of seem intimidating if you haven't worked with it before, but all 3 of these recipes are pretty quick and pretty easy. Go ahead and give them a try. You know, just have to experiment. I feel like I could still learn better ways to make tofu. I just sometimes get lazy, but even the lazy recipes can be delicious. Just remember to incorporate all your favorite spices and sauces, and you'll be cooking tofu like a pro in no time. So if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe because it really supports my channel. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye guys!